Wake up in the morning, I just gotta get it. Wake up in the morning, I just gotta get it.
All right, welcome everyone to the Schoology Learning podcast. Thanks for joining us. This is the podcast where we talk about some things we're hearing out in the world about education, as well as some tips and tricks about our favorite platform, which is, of course, Schoology. My name is Kellie Adie, and I'm joined by my colleague, Ericka Waterman.
Hey, Kelly. I'm so excited for us to take this time. I just remember how fun it was when I was teaching to take the lunchtime or, any little break that we had and just kind of talk with colleagues. So hopefully everyone can join us and just get a little chit chat about education and Schoology while they're at it.
Yeah, so let's get started. So, Eric, I'm not sure how often you do like a memory lane walk, but I happen to be looking for something around discussion boards. I don't even know what I was searching for, but I came across this blog post that I'd written like way back in the day when I was actually still at the district level. And I was reading over and I was like, oh, like we don't talk about discussion boards that much anymore. And there's still some really cool things you can do with it. And so it made me think about all of the communication needs that kids have, this fact that, kids are now feeling maybe disengaged and or isolated and like, I don't know. So it just made me think of like, oh, we should probably think about the power of discussion boards, especially now that we have AI kind of in the mix. And so I don't know, that's my idea. It's my story today.
We first of all acknowledge that you were writing blogs back before blogs were cool. Like, I just, to have worked with you back in the day would have been amazing. I just feel like I would have learned so much and incorporated so much more technology.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, and maybe I wouldn't have referred to uh the different internet browsers as Bowser, as in the Mario character.
Yes.
Yeah, super embarrassing. My first day on the job with the software company. Anyway, yeah,
That's a
that
Janet
happened.
sure. That's a
Right?
Janet story. Yes.
But no, I love that you were doing those, and I agree. It is nice to look down at what you've done before. A lot of mine was on paper because, again, I didn't have a really good mentor to get things in the technology space. And a lot of it, I realize, hey, was really gold. Like, this was good, and I could see it being good today.
Yeah.
And then there's some of it that I'm
Oh,
like, oh, I mentally apologize to the students that I taught back in the day of like, I'm so sorry that you had that. I promise I got better. So I love
like I
that you found
spent,
something that was beneficial.
yeah, you're right. I feel like the second half of my career was just like continual feelings of guilt.
It's so true.
What did
So
I
true.
do? Yeah. So,
Yeah, so teachers
um,
out there, especially new teachers, don't feel bad if you're like, that wasn't the best. It's okay.
yeah,
And
it's
we all
okay.
do it, and you're going to get there. Keep evolving.
Yep.
And I do love that you brought up discussion boards because, as I've been learning and talking more and more to customers about our Schoology product, there's times where discussion boards, I feel like, just get kind of like shoved to the wayside. They're like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a thing. But you're right. I do think there's probably a lot more use, and like there could be more power to using these than I think people realize.
Yeah. And I also feel like we saw, we've talked about this before, that once we got out of the COVID timeframe, people like sort of like turned their backs on things that are still maybe good to use, even if you are still face to face.
Yeah.
Because we used to use discussion boards with kids in the room, like as a way to capture thinking. Like it doesn't have to be, I mean, it can be done on your own time whenever that's
Mm.
also great about it, but it doesn't have to be. Um, and I was
You
thinking
know, that's
about, no, go ahead.
Well, and to that point, though, I was talking with one of my friends who's this brilliant teacher. She's lovely, and has all these great ideas and is very passionate about her students and education. But she sometimes needs that moment to think. She needs the, like, that I want to be in this discussion and have this discussion with you. I just need sometimes a moment that people aren't willing to give. And I think how powerful, even if I'm in a classroom, to your point, and I'm in person, to have that discussion board and be able to take a minute, right? And be able to respond thoughtfully on when it comes to you, instead of trying to force the issue.
I think one of the stories that stuck with me the most now, because both of us taught, language arts / English back in the day, it makes a lot more like, I think a lot of like humanities teachers would gravitate towards them anyway.
Yep.
And I remember one of the best stories we got was from a 4th grade teacher. And we had talked him into using a discussion board during his math block. And he was like, oh, I don't think this is going to he was kind of pushing back a little. And we said, just try it. Like, we'd love to know how it goes. Just be a guinea pig. And he did. And he could not stop talking about how great it went. And the thing he said that I knew in my head, but hadn't really had my cemented into my heart yet was, he was like, there are so many kids I never hear from. And they've got stuff to share. Like, to your point, they need an extra minute, or somebody raises their hand first. And he's like, just getting every kid's voice in the room was amazing. And he said, and then he's like, here's the crazy thing. We did this during the math block. He's like, but then kids went home and then they kept responding to each other. And he's like, and I'm looking, and for some of them, I'm like, these kids shouldn't be up this late. But it's super exciting to see the
But at the same time, you love it. Yeah. And that is so true. When you are only able to call on a few and you have, that there's always going to be the ones, I think you and I probably were these students where I was like, hand up, couldn't wait to give answers, couldn't wait to give my opinion. Not understanding that sometimes it's good to sit back and let others have it. And that's just, that's being a kid, right? Very hard to do that. And so what a good way to make sure that you are getting that feedback, or you are getting to see all of your students interact with each other. And some that maybe wouldn't interact with each other face to face. But it's much easier to do that via a discussion board.
Yeah. And this is like an unrelated story kind of, but the other place I saw this where I thought it was like really touching was again elementary. And what happened was they had a student that moved mid-year, and it was super traumatic. This kid left all of his friends, and they made a discussion board. And at that point, we were able to have him join, and he wasn't kicked out every night with the sync because we were handling elementary differently, but he was able to stay in the class, and then he was able to keep up with his buddies throughout the rest of that year. They made like a little connection thing, and they would have time where they would, it was really cute. But same thing of like a way to keep kids talking to each other, even if they're not in the same space. So, and we used to do these blog posts that were like, 5 cool things you could do with discussion boards, or, maybe some things, because it's kind of obvious to think about, okay, I post a prompt and then kids respond. But like, there's so many things you can do with them that are, kind of cool, especially to engage kids. So anyway,
I feel like if I'm a teacher, I'm on the edge of my seat going like, what's one of the 5?
And actually, I was thinking about this, like anyone who is teaching math, who's listening to this right now is probably like, well, can you go back to what the math teacher
right? I was so curious about that too.
So this particular teacher used it multiple times, but in this particular case, he had kids that that needed to actually talk through how they solved something. And he'd set it so that you couldn't like see or read or listen to anybody's thing until they had posted. So, but the kids got so excited to like share, like, here's how I worked this one out. And he, as I recall, he done it in groups where groups had different problems anyway. So it was like a basically demonstrate your thinking or tell me how you got through this answer. And one of the things that I thought about as I reflected on what I'd said, I don't want to say how many years ago it was now. But everyone's concern right now is that kids have easy ways to get answers because of AI. And the answer is part of the answer, I should say, is to think about other ways to assess learning. One of those is having kids actually vocally explain, communicate how they learn something or their thoughts on something where it's, authentic. So because we've got that way to just record immediately within the discussion board, pretty easy to have kids respond verbally to any prompt you have, and they can listen to each other's. And think about how we complained about how kids don't listen. How do we build in opportunities for kids to actually have to listen to each other?
Yes.
So anyway, so that was one. Another one was we did a big kind of effort around project-based learning. And so one of our things we did was talk about using discussion boards as part of the way that groups could communicate about their projects in the course. So we could, with using individually assigned, only those kids got to see the work they were doing and they, could share and the teacher could check in. So that was one way. And then we also had almost like gallery walks with one of our art classes where the kids would post the picture of what they had, and this was they were doing, I think this was a drawing, and this was actually in high school. And so they took pictures and they shared like basically their art wall. Now you could do that with a media album also, but
Oh, yeah.
the teacher liked the idea of using the rubric to like score elements of not only the explanation of what they had created, but also some of the visual elements. So there was like a grading component there that also was interesting. So
Those are some really cool examples. Very cool
I thought
examples.
so. Like, and we also
Yeah.
had kids that used them for field trips. So they'd go on a field trip and they would all take a picture and talk about a reflection on what they'd seen during the field trip. And then that again that was middle school. But one of the things that kids and the teacher loved about that was that parents got to sort of see the field trip,
Oh,
because
yeah.
they could see the post. Now they could only see their kids' post in terms of name and depending on the settings, but
Right.
yeah. So
Yeah.
anyway,
I'm not gonna lie though, that example, while cool, also gives me a little bit of like flashback to being a student where I'm like, okay, I've got to post and now I have to go post on two other people's things. You
oh
know what I mean? To meet the
yeah,
requirements. But what I did not understand as the student is how much I would need that skill in my everyday life.
right.
Like how frequently, I think of our internal messaging at work. Most companies have an internal messaging system. My 19-year-old son, the store he works at, has an internal messaging system, right? This is
Yeah,
very common. The
yeah,
amount of emailing, et cetera, that I do, not only with other colleagues, but also with professionals that, like I'm trying to hire a concrete guy. I had
yeah,
to email him, right?
yeah,
And like the having to learn and practice how to communicate in a written conversation like that, and making sure that I'm getting my point across, that I'm and then also getting my tone across, right? And I think of how valuable the practice on those discussions was, even when I thought it was like, what am I doing here?
yeah,
So it's, I think students often feel like that, like why I shouldn't have to just comment back on a field trip
yeah,
post. But really getting to understand that that's actually building a lifelong skill,
yeah.
and one that they're going to use very frequently. And it's very different from texting, right? It's a very different feel. And so you have to practice it differently.
Right. And I remember we would talk about guidelines you'd want to put in place for students for here's the rules for engagement when you're doing online conversations. It was part of our digital literacy conversations, actually. And I hope we haven't lost sight of the importance of talking about those things of how do you behave online and what's appropriate and what does tone look like and why is that harder sometimes
Yeah.
when it's written. I mean, so yeah, you're exactly right. And I worry that when we got out of COVID, so many people were like, well, we are just doing face to face and we don't want to, you know, worry about online conversations. I think there's still a place for that. And I think
I
it's so
agree.
powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've just seen it, like I said, I've seen it with my son in particular, trying to like, it's like, hey, how should I phrase this on that? How should
Yeah.
I just because it's a different method of communication, and the more practice you have with that, the better off you are.
Yeah.
Just like having the verbal discussions are great also.
Yeah.
Kids need exposure to that. But this is definitely a strong supplement that needs to be included. And what great ways that you just mentioned to kind of be creative about it and bring it into other areas where it doesn't just have to be a language arts, to your
Yeah.
point,
Right.
kind of conversation. Yeah.
And speaking of that, I mean, that's the other thing now is, the cognitive challenge of coming up with a good prompt or coming up with several if you've got kids in groups.
Oh,
And
yeah.
now with like the PowerBuddy, the generative AI part that you can do within a discussion board, have the PowerBuddy give you some suggestions on good topics.
Yeah. And as a reminder, that's an included feature. So if your
Yeah.
district doesn't use it, ask about it. But yeah, I definitely, if I hope that anybody who's listening who's like, oh, I could see the value of including a discussion board. I just don't know what would I ask?
Yeah.
Like, how would I get the discussion going?
Yeah.
That included feature of being able to use PowerBuddy to help you generate those prompts and multiple prompts very quickly, I think would be a
Right.
huge benefit to
Yeah.
get you started.
Yeah. I thought about that. Like, what if you gave it like, maybe you wanted the kids to have a choice. So there were like 5 different things where you can respond to any of these, but you have to include XYZ or whatever your
Yeah.
parameters are. So I do wish I'd had that back in the day because it's not always easy to write a good like prompt for students to respond, And it was relatively easy for those of us in language arts because you could always grab a passage and then have kids respond to it. But I mean, it's good to have other ways to have kids engage. And another thing that I saw work was just having an open discussion board, almost like a ask 3 before me kind of a thing where kids could post a question and it was usually around tech support of like, hey, I can't get this to work. And kids would respond way faster. And the teacher was like,
This is amazing.
yeah. Yeah. In fact, it reminds me of my t-shirt I had that was, it's on Schoology. So like if kids were like, hey, well, it's on Schoology.
I still
So
need that shirt.
I know
Yeah.
you still do need that shirt. So anyway, like I really hope that if people are listening who haven't like taken a dive into maybe using a discussion board, we used to actually recommend it as you're rolling it out for the first time. As a teacher, we were like, okay, here's the easy ways that you can start to use Schoology. One was posting updates. One was just posting due dates. Even if you don't like want to put the whole assignment in yet, just have the due dates in there. And then we'd recommend the discussion board because it's such a low entry, low barrier, it's easy to figure out. It's easy to respond. So anyway, if you
Well, and hopefully now with PowerBuddy helping with the content, because I do think that's the other thing is there's so many, when I talk to teachers, there's so many people who want to try things, but they're like, it's that white page, like, ugh, how do I get started? What do I type here?
Yeah.
Yeah, which is why I'm really excited that those tools exist. Again, even if it just sparks something of like,
Yeah.
oh, now I know what I want to ask because it gave me something to go off of.
Right.
So yeah, hopefully, we've given people some good ideas of how to try this and do stuff differently and, use PowerBuddy to get you some content.
Yeah. And one last thing, if you don't have linked classes, having shared discussion boards can be pretty cool. So you can't do this with linked sections, but if you don't have linked sections, you can have a discussion board that is open to other sections. It can't be graded, but like that's another cool thing is like maybe you want to pair kids up that aren't in the same section, have them have a book conversation or whatever.
Yeah.
So many little like cool things inside the discussion.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Well, I hope everybody gets out there and dives in and tries some of the different functionality that's available.
Yeah, maybe we should, maybe for our poll question, I would just be curious to know like who is still using them.
Yeah.
I think they're great. But are you using them now? Just out of curiosity. And for those that aren't, maybe that's something you can try before the end of the school year. If you haven't tried one yet, try a discussion board.
That goes back to the whole like If you haven't listened to our previous podcast on teacher burnout, one of the things was try something new, like to see if you can, bring something exciting to the table. So
Yeah.
this might be that thing.
Yeah. And maybe, the blog post I wrote had like all these broken images because I had linked to images way back before I knew that was a smart idea. And now they're all broken. But I should think about like revisiting that and, I don't know, doing a session on that somewhere, because I think people have forgotten maybe how
Yeah.
cool discussion boards are. Yeah.
Right. Just
So,
a hidden gem.
hidden gem.
of a feature.
Yet another hidden gem. Yes.
Kellie, as always, this is so much fun to be able to chat with you. I hope to all of our listeners, thanks again for tuning in. Please make sure to scan that QR code and let us know if you're using discussion boards. We'll be excited to see the results.
Yeah. Very excited as well. Well, thanks for joining this episode of the Schoology Learning podcast. Hope to see you next time where we'll talk about some more topics of interest and, of course, talking about our favorite platform, Schoology.
And in the meantime, if you click on the user toolbox at the bottom of the Schoology page, there are lots of resources out there, including other episodes of this podcast to listen to. Until next time.
And hope to see you next time. Thanks all.